My name is Steve Kerrigan. I'm an Associate Dean at the University of Northern Iowa, and I'll be your host tonight. I'd like to thank you all for tuning in and for folks who are watching this in the recordings for following. The better informed we are, the better decisions we make, and the better we can support our legislators as they try to move our communities forward. Tonight's topic is social justice. This is one that, of course, has been a very important one of late and very much in the headlines. And so I look forward to tonight's comments and to learn more about the different positions, the different things happening around the state. So before we get started with the questions and the topic, I thought we would go around round robin for 4 minutes each and have each legislator tell us about where they are and where they see things coming up in the session. So we've got about 4 minutes, and I'm going to ask Timmy Brown Powers to go first.
Thank you, Steve, and thanks everyone for being with us tonight. So where are we? That's, well, we never know until it's happening to us down at the State House. But currently, we are I'm working on a few things, and I'll share those because they don't really have much to do with our topic this evening. We did get the food bank bill passed out of the Senate subcommittee, and Bill Dotzer served on that and helped me push that out. So with that said, now our pressure comes back to Representative Hines to move it into the House side as well. So working closely with Barb and the BlackHawk team, and I think that hopefully we have a chance of getting that accomplished this year. I'm also working a lot with the Hospital Association, adult child and child care mental health issues. Really frustrated right now. We had a good telehealth bill coming forward, and for mental health, we kept it very specific for that, and the Senate killed that bill during the funnel last week. And so I have met with the Senate and visited with them. We then in turn amended the telehealth bill onto a psychiatric bed bill that is going to kind of put a committee together to track and find out exactly where all of our psychiatric beds are in the state of Iowa, because we still have families who are staying multiple days in the ER or getting shipped out of state, which is actually more expensive than taking care of our own people. So that was a Senator Edler bill, and he was very proud of that bill. He also is the individual who killed the telehealth bill. So we have amended our House telehealth bill to his Senate bill. So it will be coming back to you, Eric. And so we are hoping that he then will, he'll either take it back off and send it back, or he'll accept it and move forward. This is an important bill, and it was important prior to COVID, but it is even more important now that we've gone through COVID. And one of the things that COVID did is it proved that it is very effective and it works, and we can help people in our urban areas, but also it really expanded our services in rural Iowa. So the fact that the Senate's not taking this up is very frustrating. We kind of came to the end of our conclusion on yesterday when I was at the Capitol. You know, insurance companies don't like it. Insurance companies have a lot of money. Go to any town and look at the big buildings. So Edler needs to, I really have talked to Edler about, this is not about the insurance company. This is about Iowans with mental health issues that need help. So we need to stop letting the lobby run that bill and let the people run that bill. So that's something that we are going to work long and hard on. And then during my little 4 minutes, and I want to give just a quick update. The J&J vaccine is now in Iowa, and all the universities have that. And so trying to get as many students through as possible till the end of semester. So I know like my nephew at Iowa State is getting his next week. So that is good news. And then I wanted to let everybody know that we are right now, we have had 1.74 million doses in Iowa done, which is 711,000 Iowans with their double dose. So we are moving along well. My my point to everyone. And one of my patients today walked in and he wasn't going to get it. And I had talked to him Monday. I said, be part of the solution, not part of the problem. And so he did go get the J&J, and he came in today and said, I got it yesterday because you told me I needed to be part of the solution. So just really keep encouraging folks to get that vaccine. If we want to get to the other side of that and actually see people during the forum and be with each other, that's what we need to do. So thank you. And I'll end there, I think, on time.
I need a mute t-shirt. Eric Giddens, you're next up. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Steve. And I just want to start by thanking Representative Brown Powers. I try to do this as much as I'm able, but her leadership in healthcare issues in our state is hard to overstate. You know, we're just so fortunate to have her on our team here in the Cedar Valley and working for us here in the state of Iowa. I am not on the Human Resources Committee, so I often learn things in these types of forums that are very helpful for me. So knowing that the telehealth bill is coming back to us in the Senate is a very useful and helpful thing, so that I can help advocate for that as it bounces back over to the Senate. And also I represent, a district that includes the University of Northern Iowa. Steve said he's part of that. The Johnson & Johnson vaccine is something that we're very grateful for. The university is setting up a vaccine clinic here in the coming weeks that we're very excited about. We want to get that vaccine deployed to as many students as we can, students, faculty, and their families actually, as quickly as we can through that means. So thank you, Representative Brown Powers, for your leadership. Yes, it is appropriate to start with that topic because we should not forget that we're in the middle of a pandemic. We are not out of the woods yet. I think that there may be a lot of sort of sense of security that a lot of folks are feeling because the vaccine has begun to be deployed, that we can't rest on our laurels though, because people are still going to become infected with COVID-19. There's still going to be deaths. And so we have to continue to stay vigilant right through the end of this pandemic. We've seen in Iowa City just this past week a number of student outbreaks in classrooms in the Iowa City School District that are very concerning. I sit on the Senate Education Committee, so that's something that's we've been made aware of. We've got to continue to just be very, very careful right through the summer, I believe, and so we just want to remind people of those things. As far as the legislative process goes, Representative Brown Powers did mention that the second funnel was last week, a week ago today. What that means is that bills, in order to stay alive, policy-related bills have to have passed one chamber, and then they have to have passed out of a relevant committee in the other chamber in order to continue to stay alive. And so, our party's position is that a lot of bills died, and that, due to the second funnel, and that's a good thing. And we've lost a lot of bills that we thought were dangerous to, state of affairs in state of Iowa, and that's a good thing. There are others that we would have liked to have seen advance that may not have been given their due consideration. So we're working to see if there are ways for some of those bills to continue to stay alive, because what happens at this point in the session is that we transition, for the most part, from policy-related bills into tax policy and appropriations-related bills. So for the remainder of the session, we'll mostly be doing bills related to tax policy and appropriations. What any legislator will eventually learn, I think, and I've learned in my short time, is that no idea is dead until the legislative session has completely adjourned. So there are always opportunities for an idea to reemerge as an amendment on a tax policy or an appropriations related bill. And that can be good or that can be bad, depending on your perspective. So we have to continue to remain vigilant right through the end of the session. And on the good side of things, we can continue to try to find ways to make things happen that we think are good ideas. So that's where we are right now. I actually, in terms of my committee assignments, I am on education, transportation, state government, and then Veterans Affairs, and I have one budget subcommittee, which is administration and regulation. Because of the COVID procedures that we have in place, I haven't been able to be involved in the budget process through that budget subcommittee assignment like I would have liked to have been. We just have had to restrict involvement, between the two chambers, and so there's a lot of work that remains to happen in that area that I won't be as involved in as I would have liked to. But anyway, that's what's left to do. I just would encourage folks, if you have any concerns about budget related issues, to reach out to us. I think my time's up for this intro, but I look forward to talking about the criminal justice, social justice, racial justice issues that this forum is about in the next segment. So thank you all.
Thanks, Eric. Bob Kressig, you're next.
Okay, thanks, Steve. And good to see your face. Greetings to everybody. Taking time on a Friday night to attend the forum. The budget's been talked about, but my personal perspective in the years that I've served, I would have to say that the budgeting process is strange, to say the least, this year, because typically what we would get, the numbers that they want to move through a day or two before, we're getting them when we walk into the meeting and sit down. And I'm on the DOT budget and the RIF and the investment committee that deals with technology and those things. And so we ended up in the meeting, and that's where we found out about it. It's pretty disappointing.
Can't see you.
What's that? Somebody's talking in the background. I thought they were. So that's kind of the budget process, a little frustrating. I just want to mention briefly the prison murders that took place. Were two individuals that were serving in the correction system. We're beginning to find out a lot of really troubling things that occurred within that facility, and basically they're saying the two people that had gotten access to hammers that killed those two people should have never had access to those, never. And we had kind of a pretty heated discussion about that on the floor. It's been 10 plus years that the correction system has really suffered funding-wise, adequate funding. The session this year is 110 days. My anticipation is, from what I'm hearing, the Senate Republicans and the House Republicans are not agreeing on their numbers for the budgets. So we'll have to see, but I'm thinking maybe the 22nd of the month, we may be done for the year. Timmy talked about telehealth, and you know, it's an area that I've been concerned with too. I've actually used telehealth with my physician. It is an effective tool. And I'll be honest with you, it is so frustrating to me. I can't even explain how frustrating it is, how they're denying this. They're not moving it forward. And it's because of the big insurance companies. You know, it's just very, very, very frustrating. And also, recently, the governor signed the ending background checks for guns. And of course, with all of the shootings that are occurring today, it's really, you know, I'm not opposed to the Second Amendment. I'm a supporter of it. I'm a gun owner. But we need to make sure the wrong people don't have access to guns. And so that's kind of my comments. I see my time's about up, and look forward. I see Bill Dotzler's on board. So thank you, Steve.
Thank you. Dave Williams, you're up next.
Thank you, Steve. Thanks to everybody who puts this on and records it and makes it available for other people to watch at their leisure. And normally I'm fairly nonpartisan and try to keep things positive and win-win. Some of this may turn into campaign fodder on down the road, so we'll see how tonight's comments go. Of course, I can count on Senator Dotzler maybe to give me some cover when I'm done. So we'll see how that goes. Also, I missed 2 weeks ago. I was on my way back from Mayo Clinic. I wish that could have been done by telehealth because I had biopsies and I had injections and I had blood draws. So I was there in person. Did have a follow-up on Monday with telehealth, which worked great. And one advantage is no mask. I could see the physician's expressions as we were talking. And the topic was integrative health, which is very interesting to me and was very helpful to me. So that's my quick testimony to healthcare and why I wasn't here 2 weeks ago. So it's been an interesting 2 weeks since I had a chance to report in. I think the broadband bill got passed since then, and also it has passed in the Senate now, I understand, which I was pleased about. I worked on the policy side of that. I was the ranking Democrat for that. And then now we've moved into budgeting. I'm on the Education Budget Subcommittee, which oversees the Regents University's funding and special schools and special projects like IJAG, community colleges, things like that. Then I also serve on the full House committee. So for instance, the two budgets that Representative Kressig was talking about passed through appropriations this week. One of those, the one on transportation, most of that funding comes from revenue, gas tax, road use funds, those kind of things. And that one passed without any dissent. And then the rest of the budgets, the 5 other budgets that we looked at this week were all on party line vote because the majority party doesn't seem to put its money where its mouth is when it comes to policy. So I don't know much about social justice and criminal justice. I rely on you all to help me with that and bring me along. But I'll tell you that from what I saw in budgeting, we are not supporting our justice systems, whether that be the judicial branch, that was another budget, or the justice systems appropriately. You'll hear this claim that $20 million was added to the House budget for for Department of Corrections, but it's spread across several different areas. It's really money that is still not enough just to run the operation, let alone try to make corrections on what led up to the tragic murders that Representative Kressig talked about. So the funding is just not there with the policy that has been passed, and we haven't seen what's not going to be done yet with healthcare. Let's see, what else on budgets? Oh, one good point was REAP has been extended. We have a tendency to stick policy things into budgets, and the funding stayed at 12 million for REAP for next year, so that was good. And then I see my time is about up when I was going to start to rant and rave about the lack of support for a higher education. In the education budget subcommittee yesterday, we were told that the Regents universities are getting no increase and have their tuition frozen. So today I spent the day working on messaging and what we're going to do for next week when we have some more discussions about that budget. So if I seem a little out of whack, it's because we've been working on education all day. Thank you all for being here, and I look forward to the conversation.
Thank you, Dave. And now Bill Dotzler.
You got muted when you weren't looking, Bill.
Yeah, I muted myself. I was trying to get unmuted. Okay, well, thank you. Sorry, I was a little bit late for the forum. I actually left my charger at my house, and I thought I had it in my case, but I come over to my mom's because she's got good Wi-Fi. So she's sitting next to me, so I got to behave myself. So we'll see. There's Bob Kresick waving at you, Mom. So see him waving there?
Why? Oh.
Okay, well, I missed about 3/4 of what Senator Giddens talked about. It was good to see him earlier in the day, and I might have mentioned about the tour that we had at Cedar Valley Tech Works. We had another senator come up on the Education Committee, and it was good for us to get through the Tech Works and see what great stuff is going on over there. One of the things that I received a couple emails this week about from individuals who actually know me, and they said, Bill, I've never seen your Facebook page so partisan. How come you're not working together down there? And I'm not partisan, but I got news for him. I tried to explain it. They will not listen to a single thing we say. And it's very troubling. And it really came to a head this week when we did the bill that cuts the backfill for cities and counties. And we had a fellow senator get up, and you're supposed to talk about the bill itself. And he went on to attack Senator Bokum of some other stuff that was said in another bill way back. And earlier in the year, we were trying to give some background to a bill, and the Republicans called a point of order on us, and they got up and said, well, you're off track. You got to talk about the bill. Well, we yelled point of order, and I was involved with one of them 3 different times on this individual, and the chair, who was the president of the Senate, overruled us every time. And it was the most flagrant partisan ruling I've ever seen in my 25 years in the legislature. And it was pretty shameful. And one of the real problems is that kind of thing it doesn't sit well. And I found out later that a few Republicans had actually asked him to knock it off, and he didn't. So it was a very sad moment. One of the things that really bothered me about partisanship, and Eric Giddens talked a little bit about the budgets. One of the things that I'm the ranking member on the economic development budget, and we oversee Iowa workforce development, which does all our unemployment, labor law stuff, occupational health and safety, OSHA, and also the injury part through the workplace. And then I oversee, or at least our budget oversees, the Economic Development Authority, which is all the incentive programs in the state of Iowa, and the Department of Cultural Affairs, which is really an area that is really trying to make our communities attractive. The House managed to have budget subcommittee meetings, but the Senate did not. And I received my budget bill, had no idea all year, didn't have an opportunity to sit down in the committee and ask questions and represent the Cedar Valley on economic development. And I got handed the budget less than 24 hours before we had to speak on it. I got it on Wednesday afternoon late and Tuesday afternoon late and Wednesday morning early. We ran the bill. And unfortunately in there, some of the questions I asked the chairman that is the chair of that budget, he couldn't answer a single question I asked him. And one was dealing with OSHA. How many state inspectors do we have in order to have our federal charter? And those inspectors, it's my understanding from what we could tell, we're 3 or 4 short. And we needed them at Tyson and the facilities around here to stop the spread of COVID. And I talked about that. Also, one of the things that I was very concerned about was the budget to you and I when it comes to research at the Tech Works. And we visited that today, and we saw technology that it's just totally amazing. And the work that the University of Northern Iowa is doing to help Iowa manufacturers on what they call 4.0 is just totally amazing. So I ran out of time with too much chit chat about my problems with the computer, but I'm looking forward to the day and the questions people might have. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you all for the update. I think we all have a much greater sense of the environment you're working within, and maybe a little bit of appreciation for the energy that takes. We're now going to go on to the topic of social justice. In particular, we're going to talk about the environment, the current environment, and how it pertains primarily to social justice. So we're going to start off with Timmy Brown Powers again.
Sorry, Steve, I didn't hear you. So we're talking about.
So we're going to be talking. We're basically talking about the environment, particularly as it focuses on racial justice.
Yeah. So one of the things that we've done at the House when we look at bills is we look to see if it has a minority impact, and that's something that that we can request on every single bill. And so that is something that our caucus has really focused on, I think, in the last couple of years even, is to really look at when we're passing legislation, how does that impact folks within the minority? And so that's an area that we do work on. Last year, if we all remember, Roz worked hard on some justice system with bipartisan with the governor. It was a small step forward, but it was definitely a step forward. However, this year we'll pass a bill that does a little something, and then we do the next bill that totally cuts that out. So it is frustrating in the fact that the minority party, we present bills that we think that will be helpful. Returning felons voting rights would be a great step forward. Lessening the charges on marijuana, small amounts of marijuana. Looking at just the whole criminal justice system as a whole. I think the number is pretty outstanding that our prisons are 10% over capacity. And we are 600 employees under in the last 10 years that's happened. So we're not doing anything to help folks. Mary Wolf, Rick Olson, they are kind of key components in our Democrat caucus. and always talking about, you know, how this is going to impact our minority and justice system. So, you know, it's frustrating down there because when we take one step forward, we definitely take 3 or 4 backwards. We have, and it's not just our minority, it's women. It's equal pay for our women. It's women having the ability to speak on their own behalf on their healthcare issues. It's our refugees getting funding and embark, you know, all the great work that they do, and passing legislation that's going to help with that. Bill and I have worked with the Embark program. They're part of the budget, and you know, those things getting cut again, you know, so it's all of those things kind of put together. But so I find it very frustrating because my partners on the other side of the aisle tend to talk out of both sides of their mouth. And so we say we're going to do these great things, you know, like the Justice Bill, we're $20 million, which sounds like a lot of money, but we haven't funded them. We've cut them the last 10 years. The prisons are overfilled. You've got 600 FTEs you've not filled. So you know, we don't really put our money where our mouth is. And Al Hayes can speak, you know, for hours, I'm sure, with us on the criminal justice system and how we, you know, waste, you know, space and money and time. And Tony Thompson could speak to us for hours about how his prison or jail here in the county is full of folks with mental health disease. So it's a frustrating disease, but I have a frustrating problem, but I look forward to listening to everybody and hearing their comments and their questions, comments, and concerns.
Thanks, Timmy. Let's bring in Eric Giddens.
Okay, thanks, Steve, and thanks, Representative Brown Powers again. So this is, you know, this topic tonight is something I'm very interested in. Right shortly after getting elected to the Senate, I got engaged with a group that's called the Cedar Valley Economic Inclusion Network, because the Cedar Valley had just been named the worst place in the United States for Black Americans to live by a publication called 24/7 Wall Street, and that concerned me because it wasn't just about Waterloo, as some people might assume. That was about the Cedar Valley metro area, and I represent, as a state senator, the west half of that metro area, and I take that seriously, that we are part of that issue and that problem. And so I've tried my best to kind of get engaged and try to figure out ways that I can you know, be involved in addressing the issue. And so it has been frustrating, you know, I have to say, in the role that I'm in right now, to not be able to do as much as I'd like to be able to do. So that was back in 2019 when I was elected. The 24/7 Wall Street report was published in late 2018. I was elected in 2019, got involved during that year in Cedar Valley Economic Inclusion Network. Then we led into 2020. We all know how 2020 went. First COVID, and then during the summer of 2020, we had the murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis, and you know, an awful thing that kind of really was the straw that broke the camel's back in a lot of ways for folks that have been fighting for a more just society across our country. And you know, we erupted, honestly, and it did, you know, it included our communities here in the Cedar Valley. And so interestingly, because of COVID, we had suspended our legislative session in March. We came back in June to complete that legislative session. That was shortly after the murder of George Floyd, and all of these protests were occurring across the country. We came together under the leadership, honestly, of our Representative Ross Smith here from the Cedar Valley drafted legislation that we referred to as a plan for a more perfect union. Had 3 or 4 provisions in it that were aimed at really police brutality measures and measures to make policing safer for the folks that they're policing, and passed that bill unanimously out of the House and the Senate. It was a moment that we were all just incredibly proud of, and really in the midst of a lot of just uncertainty and uneasiness surrounding the pandemic and other issues. We all came together in that moment, and I really hope that that was a first step, and that we could continue to work on those sort of issues. And it hasn't turned out that way. The governor convened a task force to work on criminal justice reform issues. That group met following that summer session where we adjourned, finished up the legislative session. That group came back with some recommendations, that we could potentially act on. And this was the governor's task force, and the recommendations were about promoting unbiased policing. And there were 3 measures. I'm going to read those. They're directly from the executive summary of the recommendation, the report from this task force. The first one was to require and automate data collection on race and ethnicity from law enforcement stops. Second recommendation was to analyze and study the resulting data and provide annual reports on the findings. And the third was to adopt a statutory ban on disparate treatment in law enforcement activities and the delivery of police services. Very concrete steps that we could make, as a state, we could work on as a legislature to continue this path forward that we started with the plan for a more perfect union. And we have completely failed as a legislature to take up any of those measures that were the governor's task force's recommendations. So I'm very, very disappointed that those things haven't happened. I will also add that we have leadership here in the Cedar Valley, and Representative Brown Powers mentioned Dr. Al Hayes, his wife Pam Hayes. They co-founded an organization, I believe at least one of them, probably both of them are on the call right now, founded a group called the Iowa Justice Action Network that has dedicated itself to criminal justice reform issues in the state. And I have done my best to attend their Thursday night meetings, and I've always looked to them as mentors and leaders on this issue. And they have themselves a list of issues that we need to be taking up as a legislature. They have their priorities, and 4 of them actually surfaced as bills in the legislature this year. But I'm sad to report that all 4 of those bills are dead due to the second funnel. They would have been good measures to further advance criminal justice reform in this state. One of them was to institute a review of life sentences after 25 years in prison, if there was good behavior and compliance while in prison. So sort of a second chance for those folks that were given life without parole. Another one was to reduce the use of mandatory minimum life sentences. So we kind of have what criminal justice reform advocates feel like are an excessive amount of mandatory minimum life sentences on the books right now. Another one was to eliminate life without parole for accomplices to murder. So someone who, let's say, was in a vehicle, somebody got out of the vehicle, went into a place, committed murder. The person who was still in the vehicle is then given a life without parole sentence. This bill was to eliminate that as a mandatory sentencing provision. And then a fourth one was to disallow non-payment of fines and court costs as a reason to hold people without bail. We have an issue surrounding that where we're unfairly treating people around our issue of bail bonds. So those four actually were drafted into bills, and they are now dead. I'm sad to report that as well. I could talk for a long time. I see that I'm out of time for this round. I made a lot of notes about this issue because it really does, it concerns me deeply. I'm very interested in it. I'm sad to report too that what the legislature did take up and is treating seriously are issues that are going to take us in the opposite direction. You know, and are going to be more harsh treatment for people that are, let's say, involved in protests, similar to the ones that we saw last year, you know, unfairly. There are also issues around what's called qualified immunity for peace officers, which is a sort of extreme standard of immunity for peace officers. We are all supportive of our public safety officers. I want to be very clear about that. All of us are. Nobody on this call, I can speak for all of them. I don't feel uncomfortable at all saying this, that we all support our public safety officers. But some of the things being pushed are just political instruments to try to make it sound like our side of the aisle is not supportive of public safety officers, and that is absolutely not the case. And so, you know, we're disappointed that that's the way the legislature's gone. I got a whole lot of more notes here, but I hopeful that I have more opportunity to talk about them in upcoming segments because I'm out of time. Thank you.
I suspect you will. I think the questions will take at least give you a couple opportunities.
Thank you.
Bob Kressig, you're up next.
Okay, so if I remember correctly, it's been a while since the question was asked. It was about racial justice and criminal justice. I'm correct on that, right?
Yeah, okay. The environment around racial justice.
Yeah. Well, one of the areas that I just found so interesting was the resolution dealing with allowing felons to vote again. And, you know, it passed overwhelmingly in the Senate. I think there may have been a few no votes, but it got over in the House, it passed overwhelmingly, but then it got over to the Senate and it died. It didn't get moved forward. And I don't know, to me, I actually had, in the years of door knocking, I had an individual come to the door and share that he was a felon, but one of his goals was to get the ability to vote again. And, you know, the process, I think it was Governor Vilsack had a system. I think Governor Culver carried it forward. And then Branstad got in and eliminated it. And, you know, they were prevented from voting. And, you know, I was pretty sad when that didn't go forward, especially remembering my conversation with this. The other one with the racial and more understanding was the 1619 project that really helped students in schools to get the ability and understanding about the differences of race and all the things and challenges that, you know, right now we're seeing, especially our Asian people, the fears that they have today dealing with the kind of the injustice because they're Asian. And then I just got to add, you know, Governor's comment today or yesterday, I think it was, about not being willing to bring in some of the people that are the young children that are on the border. I was just appalled by that comment. And it doesn't even reflect Governor Ray, how he approached that process with the Vietnamese. He reached out to them, brought them to the state of Iowa, and look at what they did. Look at the Bosnian community. Look at all the great things they've done. To me, it's just very disappointing. You know, the criminal justice piece has been one that has been shared by others, but frustration for me is we really haven't had really any opportunity to add input to it. You know, Al Hayes, I've had interactions with him and done some of those meetings also. You know, they have some ideas. Bail bonds is one that I think that we could really address and would make a difference for people, but it's just another one of those things that you get put on you, and you know you really don't have an opportunity to deal with it. And so, you know, I think the criminal justice component, you know, one of the areas too, and it wasn't addressed, was marijuana. I mean, how many people today are sitting in prisons that were arrested because they had marijuana possession on them? You know, now be different if they were manufacturing and selling it and all that. But, you know, I think there's an opportunity for us to address those issues. Some of the sentencing things that are occurring, how people are ending up in prison for long terms when in reality they know they made, you know, it's called corrections for a reason. You get in there and you try and turn your life around, and they should be able to get the opportunity to restore their life. So I serve on public safety and have seen bills come through, and you know what I've seen is pretty interesting is some of the attorneys that we have that served with us in the legislature, the deep understanding they have, and how legislation is drafted and put forward, the impacts it's going to have on people. So, you know, I understand if you broke the law and you didn't follow the law, there should be some penalties. Totally understand and agree with that. But, you know, I think this concept of locking them up and getting rid of the key, it you know, and one of the things, you know, if you look at our budgeting, we educate, we medicate, and we incarcerate. You know, that incarceration is a big part of the budgeting process. You know, if there were ways that we could be more innovative and creative to reduce the number of incarcerations and give people the opportunity to turn their life around, to me, I think that's the right direction. So I'll leave it there, and hopefully we get some questions about specific issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bob. Dave Williams, you're up next.
Thank you, Steve. I really don't have anything to add to the previous speakers. I completely agree with everything that was said, and being assigned off in my part of the legislative process, this has been a really good discussion for me, and I look forward to continuing it. I think a couple things I'd like to emphasize or just mention in terms of the culture of the conversation. I think it was Representative Kressick mentioned the 1619 project. There was just so much hyperbole thrown around during that discussion that it just causes one to shake one's head and say, what is going on here? Just making so much out of something that really still is a great idea. And in fact, Hudson School Superintendent Tony Voss had a really good article about that in the weekly Hudson Herald about what its intention was and how teachers could use it, and why having those kind of conversations is good for our culture. So it's just been an amazing session. I completely agree that supporting public safety and our public safety officers and all the people that work in corrections, that is possible, and still working for racial and criminal and social justice. The two don't need to be exclusive. It all needs to be considered as one, and we just need to keep working across the aisle and try to not be divisive, even when we're treated that way. We've got to keep the conversation moving forward if we're ever going to make any progress. So I look forward to continuing to learn from you all, and I'll continue to keep supporting you and working with you. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. Bill Dotzler, you get to close this one.
Okay. Thank you. And with a lot been said, just to touch back on the 619 thing, one of the talking points that we heard all the time from the Republicans is that we were some way trying to rewrite history. But as you know, history is what it is. What it really was about was getting history right. And unfortunately, too many people do not understand the contributions of minorities have been to this country. And one of the greatest African American blacks to this day, vernacular, was George Washington Carver at Iowa State University, and the research that he did with peanuts. And so Iowa does have a history going back of minority people that get forgot about. And it's great to see the Democratic Party, the election of Barack Obama, to show that minority groups are brilliant people, just as any other group. The intellect across races is there. The real issue is, what kind of environment are people brought up in, and what kind of opportunities do they have? And some years ago, before I was in the legislature, I worked as a volunteer with the Gates Park Optimist Club, of trying to work with youth in the East Waterloo. And the Gates Park Optimist Club was the first and the only African-American optimist clubs in the United States for some time. And we worked with them to put on spelling bees in school, so it wasn't all about just athletics. Yeah, it was about academic athletics. And I think when you talk about social justice, we really got to look at opportunities in minority communities to lift them up and give them opportunities in our state. And that's where underfunding education is really social injustice, because if you didn't grow up in an environment where you had an opportunity to get that higher education, you're not going to get it. And young people form gangs because they don't have a vision of success, and they don't see that path to success. And scholarships and help with minorities to get them moving is so important. And it's unfortunate that we have such a negative a view of immigration in this country, because Iowa will not succeed if we don't have good immigration here in Iowa. One of the things that we were at the Tech Works today, and Senator Giddens and myself and Jackie Smith, the other senator, were there. And one of the questions was asked of us was, every business in this state has one major problem, and what was it? And it really was, the answer was finding qualified workers. And one of the things that Governor Vilsack understood is he had a saying about, we need more Iowans, and we need better educated Iowans. And the legislature is really failing us on that effort. So I really think that we need to spend more time providing grants, allowing young people to get better experience. What they got at the some of the 2+2 programs, where young people have an opportunity to experience different career levels, is so important. I want to touch back on what Representative Kressig said about the governor's comments about, we don't have any room here for immigrant children, and that's the president's problem. That was the most shocking statement I've ever heard come out of our governor's mouth. And when you look at the shortage of growth that we have in Iowa, I cannot think of a better opportunity for us is to open our arms up and get young people into our state and into our education system, and let them move forward and help us in so many ways. One of the things that we have an opportunity to do is visit the Hawkeye's Adult Education Center. And they had immigrants in there speaking to us. And one of the young men spoke 7 different languages. And he was trying to learn English, and said that it was the most difficult language he ever learned or tried to learn. And he had a master's degree. And so all this talk about immigrants and the hateful view of it is really shocking, especially when during COVID, they were the most important group to take care of our agricultural products, to the point where the governor didn't even care about their health. And we see that in the agricultural industry across Iowa, immigration is so important. So, it just hurt my heart to hear that from her, and I just couldn't believe it came out. And I don't believe that's what Iowans are about. I'm in our economic development budget, we worked with the Iowa Food Prize. And upstairs, there's a gallery of the history of agriculture, and there's paintings that what Representative Kressig talked about, Robert Ray and other groups of bringing people to Iowa, and how they've contributed, not only to our physical work and economy, but also the culture. And we find in economic development, cities across the nation that are more attractive always have extreme diversity of populations. And you have restaurants and music and, the cultural stuff that goes along with it. And we are enriched in the Cedar Valley because of the immigration that's come here. And I'm kind of very much surprised about that. One more final thing, and I don't see the chat thing on my time. I've probably gone on too long already. One of the things that I want to talk a little bit about what happened at the prison. The correctional people and the head of the union, Danny Holman, who actually was brought up through corrections, and we had for some years a senator, Rich Taylor, worked at Fort Madison. And the stories that they told me about how difficult it was with the loss of workers to get time off. And people didn't want to even call in sick because of the fact that if they called in sick, somebody else would have to do extra duty. And one of our fellow senators got to speak with a couple of retired correctional officers from Anamosa, and they told us some stuff that I don't think it's supposed to be public, but Representative Kresick was right. They should have never had an opportunity to get the tools and the hammers to crush the skulls of those individuals. And they came a lot closer than people realize to getting free. And one of the things in the prison system that's so wrong is I toured Anamosa before, way before this, in Fort Madison, and we had an individual who was incarcerated from the Cedar Valley at Anamosa, and we were trying to get him out of there with Governor Vilsack, and eventually he got his sentence shortened. It was just a bad case, but he wanted to get to the community college and get some skills upgraded. And I went and talked to the warden about what kind of educational programs they had for those individuals in there, because as Representative Kresick, Bob was talking about, it's about skills upgrading. It's supposed to corrections to give you an opportunity through life. And they do have a library there and people check it out, but to get into programs, the families had to pay for them. And most of these people came from families were in poverty anyway. I mean, that's why they got into the drug culture and got into crime, and they didn't have that opportunity. But the warden at that time was so excited that the population in school was up. And I think there was 1,300 to 1,400 inmates in there. And I said, well, how many people are getting this added training? He said, we're up to 14 people at that time. So one of the other things is that you didn't get an opportunity to get this extra education until you're about ready to get out. And at that time, it wasn't a lot of benefit. But a couple years ago, I worked with Senator Mark Lofgren on a project that we think is going the right way, and that's building housing in the prisons and allowing these individuals to pick up very important skills. So we've got and these houses have been built. They're supposed to be for middle income. There've been problems with it, but that's what we need to do is work within the prisons, put resources in there to educate people and give them an opportunity for success to eliminate recidivism. So thank you, and I'm looking forward to the questions.
So we are going to change gears a little bit now. We're going to start taking questions from the public. If you're watching this on Facebook, I'd encourage you, or if you're Zooming even, I'd encourage you to keep submitting questions. We have a little extra time, so we're going to keep going with them as long as we can until the end of the session. I'll remind our legislators that they have 2 minutes to answer these questions. You don't have to use the 2 minutes, but you certainly should use it and give a full answer, because this is a great opportunity to speak back to your people you represent. Our first question is there still a bill active regarding the death penalty? And I thought you might also, as well as giving the yes or no answer, talk a little bit about your position on the death penalty. Timmy Brown Powers, if we could start with you.
That bill is dead. However, Eric, I think, said it in our introduction, it's dead until it's not, because it could sneak in somewhere else if someone feels like that's an important bill. So that was a bill that I was not in support of. And I really felt like I'm currently working with a gentleman in my clinic who has been through the system, had made some wrong decisions. He's well aware of that. He was extremely mistreated while he was within our system. He's out, he's trying to do well, and he would have fallen under this category quite possibly. But he's a good person, and he's moving forward. He's trying to move forward, but I can tell you that every step he takes, he gets knocked back down. And I have hooked him up with several different folks, and every door that opens for this gentleman, the next door shuts for him. And so it's really, we have a group of folks that we work with at the Capitol that are very mean-spirited folks that don't appreciate the rehab and the system, and don't realize that not everybody has the gifted life to make sure that they stay on the straight and narrow, and that some people do make mistakes. And it really is, just like killing the bill in the Senate for voting rights. I mean, there's a spirit down there that is very, very negative, and it's not reaching out to help our Iowans in any way in the system. And the more I talk to this individual, the more I learn, and the more I just cringe of what is really happening when some of our folks are in there, and then when they get out, it just breaks my heart that there really is nothing, and they're expected. He has some major disabilities from some incidences that occurred, and we can't even get him disability. He makes no money, and but yet he's expected to succeed. And I I don't know. I've talked to several folks that are involved in his case, and I don't know how they expect him to do that. But had this bill passed, he wouldn't have even, his family wouldn't even be able to visit with him, because he probably would have been one that would have fit under that category. But anyway, the good part is that is one bill that is dead today, but who knows what will come of it in the future.
Thank you. Eric Giddens.
Thanks. I don't know that there's a lot to add. The bill is dead right now, as Representative Brown Power said. And yes, you never know when something's going to resurface in a funnel-proof bill, which would be a tax policy or an appropriations-related bill. I would typically shy away from calling out another senator that isn't on the line and may not be able to say their side of things here. But in this case, I think it may be fair to say that Senator Julian Garrett has a particular interest in this issue. He has raised it in the last several legislative sessions. He's introduced bills to reinstate the death sentence, capital punishment in the state of Iowa. And so if if anybody's listening and has a particular interest in not seeing that happen here in the state of Iowa, I would recommend reaching out to him and giving him any sort of personal stories, your own personal interest in why you're against it. Part of the question you asked, Steve, was our own personal opinion, and I am absolutely against the death penalty. I'll share that I grew up in a state with the death penalty in Georgia, and I always found it to be a really shocking, situation when you're watching TV in the evening and programming is interrupted to announce the death of somebody who'd just been put to death in the electric chair in Georgia. And those images, and situations are burned into my memory. I always thought they were super disturbing, and I will never be supportive of that sort of extreme penalty. I'm also a believer in data and evidence, and I haven't seen any sort of evidence that it is a deterrent in any way for the types of crimes that it's used to try to prevent. And so that's where I stand on it. I thought, that's fair to share that with you. And I hope we can continue to to keep those bills from, passing through the Iowa legislature, even during this time when our party doesn't have any control. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Eric. Bob, before you get started, I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about the bill, just so we have a little more context to work from that was defeated.
Can you repeat the question again, please? That would be helpful.
Sure. Is there still a bill regarding the death penalty active? And we've heard that there wasn't. And then what is your opinion on the death penalty, your position?
Okay. Well, the original, I think the question's been answered. The bill's not moving anywhere. I'm opposed. I think if the death penalty were in place here, the state, the fiscal impact to the state would be a fairly significant number. And then the court proceedings with that. And, I think, some people probably need to spend the rest of their life in prison because of the crime they committed. But, I'm not in favor of the death penalty at all. So that's my answer.
Thanks very much, Bob.
Yep.
Dave Williams.
I was quickly checking to see what the limitations on that bill were. Quite frankly, I didn't really follow it very closely because I was hoping and glad that it was dropped, but it had certain restrictions with, I think it had something to do with sexual abuse and murder of minors, something supposedly fairly narrow. And of course, I don't happen to be a subscriber too much to this slippery slope theory, but once something like that works its way back into the system and some segment seem to think it's okay, why? Well, first of all, I'm just opposed, just totally opposed, but why would you even consider opening the door even a crack in a case like this? Senator Giddens stole my thunder. I've not seen any data that says that it's a deterrent. People do things like that and make those kind of mistakes for illogical reasons. So maybe Dr. Hayes can explain more to us about what is going on there, but I'm opposed to the death penalty. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dave. Bill Dosler, you get to close this one out.
Okay, thanks. I'm opposed to the death penalty, and you don't have to look too far back to realize that there are definitely problems. First of all, the judicial system for minorities is definitely off base. And if anybody was a fan of America's Got Talent, last year there was a Black individual who spent 30 years for murder in prison, and they finally proved that he wasn't the guilty guy. And he was on there and was quite a singer. And the first time he was there and told his story on the stage, it was a real emotional moment. And I think that everybody in the audience, including people at home, were pretty choked up. So we've got better DNA evidence, but there have been verified executions across this country that are approaching, 50, 60 of executions of innocent people that they found out after the fact. The other side of it is that that bill is for more heinous crimes. And when you say, well, if somebody, rapes a child and murders them in cold blood, it's more about vengeance and let's get even with them and execute them. But really, my experience of visiting our prisons, I can't think anything that is more difficult to deal with for a crime than to be known that you were locked up the rest of your life in prison and you would never get out, never be able to be with your family. If you look back, there are plenty of people who commit suicide in prison because it's it's too difficult on them. And the third reason, for my conservative friends, it costs more to execute somebody than it does to lock them up for life. And when you look at the court costs and the hearings and, the things that go on. So if you're an ultra conservative and you want vengeance, lock them up for life and don't ever let them out. 2, you're saving yourself money, and then 3, most of those ultra conservatives claim to be very religious. And I don't think the good Lord wants us murdering somebody who's completely innocent. So it doesn't make sense to me at all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I note one of our attendees at the meeting, Professor Hayes, as I will call him, had a few comments. Professor Hayes, thank you for sharing your expertise, but I'd ask you to keep it rather brief.
That's hard when you're even a retired professor. But anyway, I wanted to, I guess my frustration is that in many states across the country, you see broad bipartisan support for criminal justice reform. It is not a Democrat issue. And many of the reddest states in the country have passed significant criminal justice reform. And yet we just don't have that in Iowa. And actually, I think there are Republicans in the legislature who are open to this sort of thing. But the leadership and the people that serve on key committees are ones that are just not at all willing to. I mean, there was a bill, I think, on probation reform that was supported by many members of the Public Safety Committee, and as I recall, the chairman just killed it. And so, I think, I don't know how we deal with this if we have people in those leadership positions that are just not even willing to consider it. Then the other thing I would use my limited time for is to say that the Iowa Justice Action Network over the next year is going to be looking increasingly at bail reform. The cash bail system is basically a system that punishes people for being poor, bottom line. And we have just had our neighboring state across the river in Illinois pass an amazingly progressive bail reform bill. And I don't know what's wrong with Iowa that we can't get some of that wisdom across the Mississippi to work on this issue. And I think we're going to be looking at educating people about bail reform, the injustice of the bail system, and we're going to be working on that. And that's something we haven't worked on in the past, but that's a front door to the whole criminal justice system. And then, of course, life without parole. We're working with a sentencing project on that issue. We had a very modest bill that would just simply have allowed a review process for people that are in on life without parole as a precursor to going through the commutation process, which is the only way that anyone with that sentence can ever get out, is through commutation. And yet even that very modest review proposal was not able to get through. And so again, we just need to continue to work on this, and it's just super frustrating to have some of the leadership that we have that just doesn't even want to listen on these things. One final thing, a plug. Some of you are already on our network. Next Thursday at 6:30, we're going to have an in-depth discussion of the situation at Anamosa. We're going to call in people that have had experience in the prison system to talk about it. And I think it's going to be a really good, it's a continuation of our Thursdays with IGN sessions. And if you're not on our network and don't have our Zoom information, I probably don't have time to put it in the chat right now, but you can contact me and I will give you the information. I think it's going to be a really good discussion.
Thanks, Al. You could put that link on the Facebook post.
Well, I'm not on Facebook, so I don't do that. But
you can have your wife do it because she is. In any case, speaking of changes in the law enforcement community, I wondered if we could hear your thoughts on and maybe a more thorough explanation of proposed changes in immunity for law enforcement during demonstrations and their actions pertaining to those demonstrations.
Me or
Timmy,
somebody or the legislators?
yeah, Timmy, if you'd go first.
Yeah.
You know, Steve, I've not worked on any of that legislation, so I don't have good enough details to share with folks. So I don't feel like I could really cover that well for them. Maybe Bob, because he's on public safety. I mean, I think someone that's on public safety or on one of those committees could better answer that. I'm the healthcare guru, so that's not my guru area.
Bob, do you
Didn't
have
that
any
bill
more
die?
information,
Excuse me for
perhaps?
interrupting, but didn't that bill die too? And then the funnel, that sweeping police bill, didn't that get killed? Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, I don't think it has. I know the Back the Blue thing is still moving forward through the chamber, and I think that was what most of the people that were protesting today basically gives law enforcement immunity in an arrest. And so, you know, it's kind of like what they did with the eliminating concealed weapons permit. The law enforcement didn't necessarily come out and express that they were opposed to it, because if they did, they were fearful that the process, without any improvements by them to be implemented, and you know, it just passed, and I don't get a sense that they're really necessarily listening. I know that they had an event today at the Capitol, and an 18-year-old was arrested for basically what the law enforcement has said is he pushed her arm, and so she was thrown to the ground downstairs by the cafeteria and was arrested. So yeah, you know, some of the stuff that's going on, some of the comments that are being made by the majority party too on these discussions are disappointing. But I don't have the particulars on that bill that, Steve, that you're talking in fresh in my mind, so I don't want to say something. But I do know that when we did some of the changes last year, we had a big event. The bill was passed quickly, and the governor signed it right away. And, you know, it gave made some changes to the system, but what we're seeing right now, and they're making it a political issue because they're saying, well, Democrats don't support police. Well, I'm sorry, I do, and have since I've been on public safety committee for over the years. So that's kind of where we're at with that, Steve. Hopefully that is all right.
Eric, would you like to add anything to that?
Yeah, thank you. I do have some notes on it that I could share. There's actually a lot to that bill, and so I wouldn't have been able to recite it all, but I got some notes from our judiciary staff person that's been very helpful here. The bill did pass out of the Senate, and then it made its way through the Public Safety Committee in the House, and that's why it survived the funnel. It's the kind of the one quote unquote back the blue bill that, you know, is still alive right now. And so qualified immunity is the key, you know, term in it. Qualified immunity for peace officers Bill of Rights. So it relates to, I can just kind of read through some of these things, relates to law enforcement qualified immunity and protected information of law enforcement officers as it has been amended. So it's a current state. The current state of the bill is that it adds qualified immunity language to the state and local government's tort claims chapters. The bill makes a state and local government employee not liable for monetary damages under these circumstances. The first circumstance is the right, privilege, or immunity secured by the law was not clearly established at the time of the alleged deprivation, or any reasonable employee would not believe it was sufficiently clear. Second is the alleged conduct was consistent with the law per a court decision. And what we're talking about are altercations that a police officer might have been involved in. Third situation, neither the state or any local government may be liable for any claim if the employee is found to be protected by qualified immunity. Fourth situation, any court decision denying qualified immunity will be immediately appealable. Qualified immunity language is effective upon enactment of this law. Bill makes changes to the peace officer investigation processes. That's kind of, there's a lot of things here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 changes to investigation processes of peace officers who are involved in some sort of altercation. And then a couple other provisions. One is law enforcement officer may request that their name be redacted from the county land records information system. So any sort of permanent record of an altercation there. And then the last one, the Secretary of State may refuse to accept a financing statement that is not created pursuant to the Uniform Commercial Code or as otherwise intended for an improper purpose. Language is in response to a group called, this is an interesting one, called Sovereign Citizens, if you've heard of Sovereign Citizens. So this law actually writes in these sovereign citizens and their claims into state law now. So language in response to a group called Sovereign Citizens who members regularly file fraudulent Uniform Commercial Code filings against law enforcement officers and public officials. Under current law, the Secretary of State has no authority to reject these filings, but they would under this bill. So if you'd like more detail, I'm happy to share this summary with anybody else who would like to request that. So thank you.
Thanks very much, Eric. Dave, would you like to add anything?
I've got nothing to add other than it's been an interesting process where I think in this case, maybe the Senate did separate issues and the House had more of a blanket, whereas normally this session, it's been the other way around where the House has the separate issues and the Senate has a blanket. So we're waiting to see what happens with this, and then I'm sure our research staff and the appropriate committee will be ready, but I don't have any detail to add to that.
Thank you. Senator Dotzler?
Yeah, just I think Eric did a good job going through there, but let me just add this. I have a attorney, Senator Nate Bolton, sits next to me, and in the discussions with him, it basically gives a police officer almost total immunity for doing stuff that they wouldn't be able to get away with before. One of the specific cases I think that comes to mind was where these officers had a known knock warrant, or they were chasing somebody. They went to the wrong apartment, kicked the door in, and an individual was there, thought they were being robbed. They pulled a gun out and the police shot and killed a guy. So it was really a home invasion by the police who had no reason to go there. And I just heard that one of those states, I think Alabama passed a bill today that really took some of that away, that said that only for certain reasons could you have no knock warrants and charge into somebody's house. and you could only do it at certain times of the day also. So these occurred at way late at night, and according to the attorneys that deal with this, said that it'll be almost impossible for people to recover damages in a police officer's action. It gives them, it's the highest standard of immunity you could possibly have, to just put it bluntly. So we pretty much voted against it. We think that officers ought to have some immunity, which they already have, but this went way too far. And it's something that even the officers within the Officers' Bill of Rights were real happy with, because there are bad actors, and we got a case going on right now, and the qualified immunity might have affected the settlement up in Minnesota, where it was more than 20 million, I think $27 million that they settled with, and he might be able to be convicted or not under this language. So it depends on, there are some exceptions that you can't do, but it's very tough standard. It's a very high standard. It's one that only several states have, and now we've got it.
Thank you very much, Bill. We're gonna switch a little bit within the topic of social justice, and we wonder if you could update us on legislation that would limit the school's teaching topics that some legislators consider divisive. Timmy, could you share your thoughts on that?
Yes, so, our teachers and our superintendents and our local boards all do a good job at taking care of what is taught or not taught. And Representative Holt in the House, his wife is a teacher, and so he has specific things that he thinks needs to be taught or not taught in class. So we had a robust discussion about how we cannot talk about white privilege or minorities or in the classroom, and that our teachers need to stay away from those topics, because his belief is that, obviously he doesn't believe in white privilege. And his belief, though, is that we should not be setting our students up. And he believes that by us talking or teaching in that direction, we are actually being more racist than if we actually openly discuss it. So it has been our education committee, which Roz is ranking member of. That committee has some great Democrat staff sitting on there, and they have really come up with some good argument, good amendments for that. I visited with our Waterloo superintendent, and in fact, I think today she even posted something on that her staff is talking about racial injusticeness and minority impacts and those kinds of things. And I think it needs to be left up for that. Let's always remember that the Republicans want smaller government until they want to take over everything. So it's frustrating in that fact that we want smaller government, but we're going to tell you what you can teach, what you can say, what you can do. And that bill wasn't just that was for at all levels of education. So that would have affected our college universities. I mean everything, which was really inappropriate. And I think Al, when he was talking about why we can't get bipartisan things, the leadership, I mean, I want to believe that not all of my Republican colleagues were supportive of that legislation, but I can tell you that that they will do what they're told to do. And they'll vote. So if the leadership is being guided that way, or there's a financial push to pass legislation, then it's done. So we manipulate the Constitution. We manipulate legislation for special interest and or money. And so I'm not sure I think the conversation started because people were uncomfortable with the word white privilege, and that we were saying that we were less of, and that wasn't the point. But it comes down to that they wanted to dictate what our education system was doing and not leave it up to the local universities and school systems to do the appropriate thing. And so it was a sad debate, and it really was kind of a negative, left a negative feeling. We've had kind of a negative vibe in the House for quite some time this session.
Eric Giddens, would you share your thoughts, please?
Sure. That bill, I'd like to back up. We had a version of that bill in the Senate Education, early on, that then got altered when it moved over to the House. It first started out, was very much framed as a First Amendment and free speech related bill, but it essentially was a rewrite of an executive order that President Trump issued, effectively banning diversity training and any sort of training that involved quote unquote divisive concepts that you referred to earlier in any sort of curriculum, right? And so in a way, thankfully, the House actually divided the bill that had come over from the Senate, divided into two pieces. And one part of it passed out of the House and came back to us that was a decent First Amendment bill, because we actually do want to support our First Amendment rights. And so that was something that, as it came back to the Senate, we were able to support. But then the other part of it that was, formed into a different bill in the House was this divisive concepts piece, and that certainly is not something that we're able to support. So in a way, it sort of it made things clearer for us when it bounced back over to the Senate that this piece on banning the instruction of divisive concepts is not something that we're able to support in any way. I don't know that I can state it much clearer than Representative Brown-Powers did. This is something that threatens white privilege. Those folks that aren't comfortable, acknowledging the privilege that they have, and so that's where we are these days. There's really some culture war, type things going on here that is where we are, and it's sad to me that we can't look at our history of objectively and really consider what's led us to this point and why some of us have a lot more than others do, and that's what is at the basis of this, in my view. And so I'm against the bill, and I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eric. Bob,
Steve, real quick, I just wanted to add that, on a weekly basis, we're manipulating the Constitution to best fit the Republican Party, which is very frustrating. I'll shut up. There you go, Bobby.
No, I think everybody, the comments that have been made are right on board, and I agree with what was said. So those are my comments.
Great, thank you. Dave Williams, do you have anything to add?
You had to be there to believe it, or, well, I think maybe be there, just feel it. It was frightening. It was truly an emotional experience to listen to the rhetoric and try to figure out, where is this coming from? And I think what Senator Dotzler said, that you can't rewrite history. History is what it is. But I think that was part of the context, was there's this denial going on about some things that have happened in our history, and just trying to sweep it all under the rug like it never happened. That's my simple perception. Another part of that is that I'm hesitating here because it seems to me that there's a certain segment of the legislature that is trying to hang on to the way things have been, or maybe the way the things were until about 10 years ago. And I'm not a good person on trends, but you know, that we're more diverse than we were, especially racially. And another reason I was hesitating is because, you know, there have been some social media posts lately, people also opposed to this training that pointed out where we've assimilated other cultures. I guess most of them were white, but still there were issues with Irish, for example, assimilating into the country, and the Danes assimilating into Blackhawk County. So this has happened in the past, but it just seems so much worse this time. And I think it was Rep. Brown Powers talked about it's affecting all levels of education. It's also affecting state agencies where some training has had to be canceled because leadership is concerned about being prosecuted by its own employer. So it's just unbelievable. Thank you.
Senator Dutchler, before you speak, is this bill still active?
Well, that would be for Senator Dotzler or Senator Giddens.
It is?
Well, it went to the Senate, so I presume it is.
Okay.
Yes.
Senator Dotzler, would you share your thoughts on this particular bill?
Well, yeah, I think a lot's been said about it. It's unfortunate that we've got into this discussion that people basically are trying to say you cannot talk about race issues in any way that might even make you feel uncomfortable where the trends are in this state. And, you know, if you started in a classroom and started to talk about Governor Reynolds saying that we don't want immigrant children here, and somebody feels uncomfortable about us saying that's a wrong statement, you could get into trouble. It's unfortunate because Iowa started out as one of these states that stood up for human rights. We were the state that said we weren't going to have a slave state. We were the first state that allowed mixed marriages between whites and other nationalities. And we were one of the first states that okayed marriage between same-sex couples. So something's gone real bad in the last decade, and you know, it's a real travesty. And as Representative Williams said, you had to be there to really believe what you were hearing, and I still can't believe it, and I was there.
Well, thank you all for your thoughts on this. It is time for us to start wrapping this up, and so I want to offer the opportunity to each of you in turn to share some closing comments, where we are, where we're going, what your hopes, what your fears are. Timmy, if you'd go first.
We probably don't have time for all my fears because I have several. So, but my hopes is that we do, you know, that we're able to hold on to a few of the good pieces of legislation moving forward. This year, all of us on this team do try to work bipartisanly and to try to engage with folks that we know on the other side are trying to work in a common way. I think Al Hayes kind of hit it on the head that, you know, it does appear that there's no bipartisan work. And this year, Bob and I have had a lot of conversation is that there is a lot less than there ever has been since I've been here. And Bobby feels that same way. And he's been there longer than I have. But so I'm hoping that we can, you know, hold on to some of that, some legislation. I'm hoping we can get telehealth back in to the conversation. That is vital for our patients and for Iowans. You know, and but this has been a hard session just because there's been no communication, and there is an arrogance and a negativity in the Capitol that they don't have to talk to us. They will just kind of ram things through, and so I feel like our job is to educate our constituents as much as we can, to be as transparent as possible, and to explain the legislation coming through. We are very fortunate in the fact that we all have kind of our niches. So I lean on Dave and Roz and Bob for their strengths, and the senators have their strengths that we can go across, and Bob, our bill does so much with economic growth and those kinds of things, and Eric is really our land steward of the Capitol, and so we have that and we utilize that. But I think 2 weeks ago I talked to Jerry about, I think we need to get out of this session with as little harm as possible to Iowans. I don't think that Iowans understand what they maybe voted for, and what some of this legislation really means. So it's going to be our job to educate, and then also our job to be out there to showcase what's happening in Blackhawk County and the good things that are happening, and really engaging in community events so that we can move Waterloo and the Cedar Valley, Cedar Falls forward in a positive way, and continue to work together, because this has been a hard one, and this is only halfway of the session. So we got, I mean halfway of the term. So we got another year of this before we can change it at the ballot box. So, thank you everybody for joining us tonight. It is so much appreciated that everyone joins us. I know we get quite a few views throughout the week.
Eric, do you have any final thoughts you'd like to share with us?
Sure, thank you. I just want to thank everybody who's attended. Thank all my colleagues. It's great to every chance we have to be together. I appreciate it. I also just want to say, on this topic that we gathered to talk about tonight, we have the experts in our community here in the Cedar Valley. I can't say that enough. I mean, I've learned so much from people in our community about this issue. And if we had the opportunity to set policy, we can do the right thing. We have that knowledge here. So, I mentioned being involved in the Cedar Valley Economic Inclusion Network. That group is really all about diving deep into the systemic and institutional and structural issues that have created the situation that we're in right now, and what do we do to correct those things on a policy basis. We've just got some incredible knowledge and resources in the community here. And it was mentioned earlier in our event tonight about the 1619 project, and Nicole Hannah-Jones, who authored that work, is a Waterloo native. I don't think that maybe came out tonight. I mean, she is an incredible resource. She actually spoke last night for the Harkin Institute at Drake University. I attended that event online. Every time I've heard her speak, she's just an incredible person, and she's very proud of her Waterloo heritage, and we need to remember that, and we need to listen to folks like her. But at the end of the day, we've got a whole host of issues that need addressing on a policy basis, and we're just not doing it right now. Whether it's education or healthcare or, housing and urban planning issues, or workforce issues associated with hiring practices. We've got great leadership here with the Society of Human Resource Management. Kyle Road is somebody that some of the folks on the call may be familiar with, the leader of that group. I've learned so much from him about things that can be tweaked in an organization's hiring practices to really change the scope of, wealth accumulation in our community, that kind of stuff. Business ownership and policies that can support Black and minority-owned businesses in the community, the promotion of diversity on boards and commissions and so forth can really have a significant impact on decision-making power and authority in the community. And so we got a lot that we need to do. We just need to kind of regain some balance in this state so that we can work on some of these things. And my time is up, but I'm very grateful for having the opportunity to work with such a talented group of colleagues like this, and for all the support that the folks in our community have given all of us to trust us in doing this type of work. And we're going to continue to do all we can to fight for these issues, and hopefully regain some balance eventually in this state so that we can enact some of these policies that folks in our community are telling us we need to do. Oh, and I wanted to loop back to Al and Pam Hayes, who are on the call tonight for criminal justice reform issues. There's nobody better in this state to help guide us than those folks. So thank you so much for their leadership, and I'll stop at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Bob Kressig, any final thoughts?
Yeah. Hey, thanks, Steve. Did a great job. You kept the process moving forward, so I'm thankful. And thank you to the League of Women Voters and BlackHawk-Bremer. It's disappointing that some of our colleagues on the other side of the aisle chose not to be here. I know they were invited, and just to get kind of their perspective. One perspective I'd like to share, I'd sure like to get back to meeting together soon. I don't know when that's going to occur, but it's just good. It's good to see us on the computer, but it's almost nice to see the face in person. So I know Timmy has strongly advocated for the telehealth, and I have too. I think that's a critical issue going forward. It's a technology improvement, and I'm just hopeful that we can make that happen. I know the food banks, and Timmy has worked on that, and I've been involved. We just need to give them the ability to not have to pay taxes on equipment or purchases so that they can use those dollars to feed people. And that's the whole thing. It's just frustrating. The other one, mental health, I've been working on that issue for several years now. The state of Iowa has really done not a very good job with regarding to making mental health accessible. And there's two areas. Critical care access. You can go talk to an emergency room nurse, doctor. Those folks, typically a mental health person will come in there and, they don't have anywhere to send them. And then early intervention. Our K-12 schools, our children, especially with this pandemic, not just the children and adults, but there's a lot of issues. We need to get the state to add the funding, put it in place so that we can start to deal with this issue. It is a health care issue, and it's just frustrating to me. I'm not going to go on anymore because I'll start getting upset about it, but it's just, we have experts in the community that if resources were there, they'd be able to help address these issues. The other one, We just saw the budget come out. I think it was mentioned earlier on with regard to Regents funding. Well, guess what? UNI gets zero increase, zero. And it's going to be a big, big issue for that school going forward. And, you know, I'm hopeful that we can come up with something that gets some additional dollars for the university. So appreciate everybody being here and all my colleagues, and have a great evening.
Thanks very much, Bob. Dave Williams, final words.
Thank you to the group that puts this on, and thank you to people who are taking time to watch it. We do work together as a team, as Representative Brown Powers mentioned, and you're welcome to contact any one of us, and we may include another representative or senator in the discussion, or we may forward the communication depending on the expertise, but we're here to support you, and we will continue to do that. And then a comment that Representative or Senator Giddens made has to do with the Cedar Valley. I've said this, I know I said it last year, maybe I haven't mentioned it yet this year, but one thing I realized during my first term is I really think that the Cedar Valley is in kind of a sweet spot in the state by the nature of being a university town, by having diversity compared to other parts of the state, the size that we have for culture and recreation. And I think for the most part, I agree with Representative Kressig. It'd be great to have other policy views here shared, but I think for the most part, we have progressive policies, but are still fairly moderate and line well with the area. My fear is, though, that especially for other parts of the state, that the middle class will continue to be downwardly mobile. That really concerns me. I think the budget year will end with even more of a surplus than we had, when we could be investing that money in higher education and other places. I can give a shout out to our timekeeper. The community colleges are getting a 3% increase. So, and IJAG is getting a $1.4 million increase, at least recommended by the House. And I know I'm going to go over my time here, but I gave away some minutes before, so I got a couple other things to share, unless you cut me off. And that is, out of the clear blue today, I got an email from a lobbyist who I don't always agree with, and it happened to be the House Republicans newsletter. And again, I wish other members of the other party were here, because the House Republican newsletter was making some not positive observations about the Senate majority party. So that was very interesting to see what's going on there. I think the good news, what little good news there could be, is even though the House is saying no increases for the Regents universities, it's likely that the Senate will appropriate some money for the Regents universities. So we don't know exactly what's going on behind the scenes with majority party, but the House proposal for higher ed is probably as bad as it's going to get, and it might improve a little bit there. So that's the good news. And then UNI's Industrial Technology Center project is continuing to be funded. So are a couple of other special programs, some special programs at ISU and UI. But the bad news is, with the tuition freezes and the lack of increase in the general fund, that's hurting our students, that's hurting their parents, and that is just, we are cutting off our nose to spite our face. So we will stay positive, we will keep having conversations across the aisle, and we won't give up. Thank you all for watching and participating, and stay in touch. Thank you.
And as is only appropriate, we'll end with our senior senator, Senator Dotzler.
Thank you, and thank you for everybody who's listened through this. I just want to say one thing. this has been one of the most difficult times for all our legislators who are in the minority party. We get emails from people from our district saying, you gotta stop this and you gotta stop that. Why are you letting this happen? And if we could, we would. There's no communication. I think we might have had one amendment taken that I can remember in the Senate, maybe a couple. And we're absorbing a lot of negativity because of the extreme environment that's going on. And I see Senator Harper is watching, and she served in the minority. And we had a lot of difficult times back then in the minority. She was a senator in the House, and I was in the minority in the senator, and I was in the House. And but it's nowhere like it is today. And the negativity that's going on and the extremism is tough. And a lot of legislators are coming to me saying, Bill, I don't know if I'm going to come back. I can't take this anymore. And my response to them is, somebody's got to stand up and fight. We got a delegation here that's been doing that, and I'm proud of them. And we're going to continue to fight. And whatever happens down the road, if you got to go, you got to go. But right now, we're there fighting for our communities and families across this state. So thank you very much.
Well, with that, I'd like to thank our legislative participants. It sounds like you're working incredibly hard and very passionately, and I think we all appreciate that. We also sounds like it's a pretty emotionally draining process, and I want to say that we all appreciate that as well. So it makes your time and your service to us today all the more valuable. So thank you for your work. It's incredibly important, and knowing that you're there fighting for the Cedar Valley, I think makes us all feel a little better. I'd also like to thank all the folks watching today and folks who are watching later on in the week and reviewing. I hope our words were correct. And I'd also like to thank the League of Women Voters for allowing me to participate today, because this is important work, and we're all better served for participation. So with that, I'd like to adjourn today's meeting and thank all participants. So thank you very much.